Judges chapter 19. When I was pastoring in Texas during a Sunday school class, we were going into Genesis and talking about Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. And of course, there is I'll try to get this kind of middle, I guess. There we go. The story about Hagar is a sad one when you really look at the way she was treated by Sarah. Of course, Sarah in the end wanted to get rid of her, even though Sarah's the one that messed up and didn't believe God. But again, we see the mercy of God in her life. But when I was teaching on that, of course, there was one lady in the classroom that got really bothered. She was very angry because she was just bothered why God would allow Sarah to just kick Hagar out and treat her that way and the way Hagar was treated. Of course, what we have growing up in this society is a lot of people that, and I get it, a lot of ones that experience a lot of things, but we really don't have a clue for a lot of stuff people in other countries. When you go and what they experience and what they've had to face. And so when we look at the scriptures, we kind of look at it differently. We don't really know the history. We don't understand with the culture. And so we just kind of look at it through these rose-colored glasses at times. And a lot of times there's passages where we really want to gloss over. We don't really want to get into it. And of course, I tried to get that lady to understand that we see God's mercy in the midst of man's frailty and man's mistakes through that and mankind's failures. It's not that God overlooked her. God provided for her. But again, we gloss over things. And of course, this is a passage here in Judges 19 that oftentimes can get glossed over. And it's something that there are quite a bit of passages where preachers really don't want to go into. That's just the honest truth. Because I've seen where a lot of preachers will sit there and gloss over and kind of, let's just skip on through these passages here, And because it's just a very difficult thing. This one, I would say, is that as well. But we're going to go into this because I think there is a principle fully in this passage that we can learn from and understand. Notice in Judges chapter 19, in verse 1, it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. Now, when that's stated here, you're going to find in the book of Judges, one of the aspects of this in Judges is the fact that there was no leader. Now, it doesn't mean that simply they didn't have a king and a king would have fixed everything. We know that's not the case because if you go to 1 Samuel and you read about that, the Israelites wanted to be like other nations. The fact was that they just were not being led by the King of Kings as they should have. They should have sought to be led by him. But this here in the book of Judges, you're going to find that for the most part, they just were leaderless. And so there was a lot of sin and corruption going on at this time. Then we go on. It says there was no king in Israel. There was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. Now this woman was his wife. Yes, she was concubine, but the fact was, it's believed he did not have a dowry for her, but she still was his wife. And she played the whore against him. Now that just simply means that she went away and ran away from him and was unfaithful to him. And she went to her father's house, to Bethlehem, Judah, and was there for 4 whole months. Now, the Levite probably was hoping that she would return. And we do see that he was one who was going to seek, even though she ran off from him, he was going to try to bring her back and even forgive her. But again, we notice here in verse 3, and her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her. He sought to speak kindly. Now, he didn't have to do that at all. She's the one that ran out and was unfaithful and everything else. But the fact is that he sought to bring her back. And we notice here, now again, it's this here, he should seek some kind of reconciliation. But he goes and to bring her again, having a servant with him and a couple of donkeys. And she brought him into her father's house. And when the father of the damsel saw him, he rejoiced to meet him. Now, the father-in-law was very happy about him coming. And so this was a happy occasion. He really was hoping that he would come and get his daughter and be able to just fellowship. And we don't know as far as how long it had been since the father-in-law had seen the Levite here. But he's very thrilled about this, him coming. And it says here in verse 4, his father-in-law, the damsel's father, retained him, and he abode with him 3 days. So they did eat and drink and lodge there. And of course, what takes place is that the Levite is willing to go and ready to go. We do see this laxness on the part of the Levite, because he seeks a plan to get back. Maybe there's a reason. It seems like there may be a reason also, that a timeline why he's got to get back in that time. But the father-in-law says, hey, it's getting late. Stay. Come on. Just, let's have supper. Let's enjoy ourselves. And maybe you can go the next day. So he kind of just says, okay, and he stays that night. And then it goes on again, and it says in verse 6, they sat down, they did eat and drink, both of them together. For the damsel's father said to them, be content. I pray you, and tarry all night. Let your heart be merry. And when the man got up to depart, the father-in-law urged him again in verse 7. Therefore he lodged there again. So you see kind of a laxness here. He should have, it seemed like, left at the time that he was looking to leave. But the father-in-law is saying, oh, please stay some more. Let's just enjoy ourselves, spend some more time here. And eventually, finally, after a while, the Levite says, no, I've got to go, I've got to leave. And so it says in verse 9, when the man rose up to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the damsel's father, said, behold, now the day draws near. It's getting dark. By the way, this is not something you just get in the car and you drive, and you got your windows rolled up and your doors locked, and you don't have to worry too much about anything. Boy, you get on the road in the evening time, you better find a place to sleep soon, because it is very dangerous on the roads and traveling. But again, he says it's getting dark. It's getting close. He says, come on, stay a while. But verse 10, the man would not tarry that night. He did not. He said, I've got to go. He rose up. He departed. He came over against Jebus. Now, which is Jerusalem. This was in this region here. There were with him 2 donkeys saddled, and his concubine also was with him. And when they were by Jebus, the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, come, I pray you, let us turn to the city of the Jebusites, and let's stay here. Let's lodge therein. Well, the Levite said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go to the Jebusites. This is where some ones from Canaan would be. The Canaanites, he says, I'm going to stay in a place that would be where my own people and the Israelites would be. So where does he go? He goes, it says, he drew near to one of the places to lodge all night in Gibeah or in Ramah. And they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down upon them when they were by Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. Now here's the sad reality. We see the laxness of the Levite. We also see the inhospitality of the inhabitants, the people that were there. Why? They couldn't find a place to stay. Now, you did not have Motel 6. And of course, they may not have wanted to stay there, but you didn't have that there. You had people that would, the culture at that time, and which is not a bad thing, but you had people that would travel through and they would try to find a place that somebody would have. Normally people would have an extra room. They'd have somewhere where a stranger could lodge. Now they didn't know to stay there welcome. I've heard sometimes people would say, well, companies like fish, after a couple of days, they start to stink. So they didn't do that. They would go, they'd stay that night, but they're traveling through. They were sojourners in that land. By the way, the scriptures talk about that. When it comes to in 1 Peter, he talks about it, that we are sojourning in this world. We're strangers, we're pilgrims, we're just traveling through, but for some weird reason, we overstay our welcome. And we just hang around. And we don't realize that we're journeying through. And we have a home, we're homeward bound. And we've got to live that way and keep our sights on heaven. But again, this happens where they cannot find a place to stay. People were very inhospitable. They would not have them stay. Now, what it seems like was the people were not just inhospitable, but the fact was they were probably concerned because they knew if they brought somebody new into their home, they would be targets. And we'll look at this here. But eventually, after a while, an elderly gentleman comes from working and comes to see them, and he says, what are you doing out in the streets? You've got to have a place to stay. Come to my house. You got one person here that he's not. He has hospitality. Now it is sad because what we find is in this society the same way. Especially I know up north there was ones that kind of, I would say they were on survival mode. That's the way it was. They were concerned basically about their sphere, and that was it. And if somebody had issues or struggles, it wasn't so much that they didn't have any care at all, but it's just simply, well, that's their business. I'm trying to survive and do what I need to do in my life, and so they just didn't do much when problems would arise. And, we talk about, when I was up north, I talk about that southern hospitality. I say, boy, that's good hospitality, except the reality is that they'll smile to your face, but they'll do what? When you walk away, they'll stab you right in the back. Yes, that's southern hospitality to the T. It doesn't matter. People will do that, but that's just the way it is. But again, it's nice to have people that they are kind. They open up their home. They try to be kind. But again, sadly, that's also leaving. We see also that's beginning to change even in the South. But this is where there were people that should have allowed them to come into their homes, and they didn't. Finally, this elderly gentleman brings them in their home. And now we see the depth also of the city's depravity. Because we notice in verse 22. Now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial. Now, a son of Belial, that term that's used, it meant son of worthlessness. Son of worthlessness. Belial was not. Yael was to no profit. Not profitable. But it went even further than that. It had an expression that denoted a person that was low-minded, almost animalistic in their mentality. They didn't have any principles in their life. They were, as some would call, they were vile scoundrels. So when you read sons of Belial, all that simply meant was a depraved individual that was just vile, and they were low-minded, and you could bribe them so easily. They would be bribed so quickly. They had no morals. Basically, your average politician. Jesus said in John 8:44, you are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there's no truth in him. Son of Belial also was a reference to a demon of the abyss. It was a term in this way that almost you would be saying they were a son of the devil, a son of a demon. So this is where we look at the depravity that's taken place. I saw just this week, 12-year-old girl, Jocelyn, her first name, there in Houston, Texas, murdered 2 men, illegal immigrants from Venezuela. They had already been apprehended a month prior, but they just went on their merry way, right? Now I'm not going to sit here and say, well, no one else in this country would do that. No, we see the atrocities that takes place. What do? This girl, she went out from her home. She wasn't supposed to do that, but she went out to go to a gas station late at night and meets those 2 men. They abuse her for several hours, and then they murder her and throw her over a bridge. Those are sons of Belial. Those are vile scoundrels. Those are wicked, demonic individuals. And of course, a lot of people are very angry because they know that they're going to get a slap on the wrist. The only reason why something would be done is because it becomes political. But it is sad because we start to see this even more and more in this country. And by the way, we see it. It doesn't matter whether a person is illegal or not. We see it, don't we? All over. It is sad. We see there are a lot of sons of Belial in this country. Well, what happens here is these individuals, these wicked, lewd individuals, go to the house. And they go around the house. They beat on the door. And they say to the master of the house, bring the man out that we may know him. They want to have intercourse with him. That's what they want. By the way, what does this remind you of? It reminds you of a certain city that got obliterated by God. But this is Pride Month, right? And here they are. They're proud of what they're doing. And they say, bring them out. Bring them out. Late at night. And they've already probably drank a lot. And they said, bring this. We know he's new in town. Didn't matter whether he was a Levite of the priesthood. That didn't matter. The man of the house, the master of the house, he said, don't do something so wickedly. Something so horribly. What a foolish thing to do. But it's sad because it's similar to Genesis. Or it's similar to with Sodom and Gomorrah when they went out and beat at the house and said, we want the ones that came here, bring them out. Now they were angels and they caused the people to go blind. But sadly here, that doesn't take place. In fact, the master of the house says, I've got a daughter. You can have my daughter and you can have this man's wife. They don't want to listen. They said, we can take everybody if we want. But it's sad because in verse 25, the men would not listen. So the man took his concubine and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her and abused her all night. All night. And then when morning came, the Levite came to the door, opened the door, and she was laying there on the threshold of the door. She was dead. But he thought she was going to get up. He tells her, come on, we got to go now. So what does he do? Well, he takes her body and he cuts her in pieces. And he sends 12 members of her body, 12 parts of the body, to all the tribes of Israel. That's a pretty terrible thing, isn't it? What's happening? These are people that are leaderless. These are people that they're living their life not unto the Lord, but unto themselves. We see the depravity of mankind. But he does this and people are shocked because it was a symbol and a representation of the atrocity that took place. And he said, if I bury, no one knows what will happen. So what I'm going to do is let everybody know what just happened. And boy, he got their attention, didn't he? Because it says here in verse 29, he came to his house, he took a knife, laid hold on his concubine, divided it. And it was so that all that saw it said, there was no such deed done. There's never been anything like this ever done in this land. And they said to themselves, consider it, take advice, and speak your minds. They're saying, we've got to do something about this. Now, it is sad because I sit there and I think to myself, at what point in society do we finally look and we say, we've got to do something about this? Does it take something like this to actually open people's eyes? This was so atrocious, this was so horrific, but it took this kind of act for people to finally say, wait a minute, we're messed up, something's wrong, we've got to do something about it. I remember when 9/11 took place and people were constantly talking about, oh, this is going to open people's eyes. People are going to turn to the Lord. No, they did not. Only for a little bit of time did people finally wake up and say, we've got to do something. But eventually that fizzled and it was very little. And of course, we began to just simply trust in the government and trust what the government said and believe that, well, there's an enemy over there. And once we do that, it's going to fix all our problems. No. It was that we were supposed to come to God and follow him fully here in this country. And we didn't do it. And when we gave our rights and we gave even more things to the government and more control and everything else, and we just went back to living a corrupt life. So these people are very angry of what has happened. And what we see here in chapter 20, notice with me in chapter 20, in verse 1, then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man. They were all united in anger and in vengeance. By the way, this is not a bad thing. They were angry over what took place, and they're trying to figure out what happened. So they go, and it says here that they were united from Dan even to Beersheba with the land of Gilead unto the Lord in Mizpah. And the chief of the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, they presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God. And there was 400,000 footmen that drew sword. They gathered themselves together. They assembled this massive amount of people to go and fight because they're trying to figure out what kind of atrocious thing took place. We're going to go to fight. The children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. And then said the children of Israel, tell us, how was this wickedness? What happened? And the Levite, the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came to Gibeon. I and my concubine, we went there to stay and lodge. And he said, and the men of Gibeon rose against me. They beset the house round about upon me at night, and they thought to have slain me. They meant to kill me. Now he doesn't go into, I don't know if he's just trying to gloss over a little bit of what they really were trying to do. But he says they meant to kill me, and it may have been that they were seeking to do that afterwards. But he said, and they tried to kill me, and my concubine they forced, and now she's dead. They abused her, killed her. And he said, and this is why I did that deed, and I sent her parts all throughout the land. Because I wanted you to notice, he says, for they have committed, in the latter part of verse 6, lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, ye are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. He said, I had to get somebody's attention of the wickedness that was going on. So, what takes place is they basically say, we are going to kill these men. We are so angry. There's such a vile thing that took place. And so they go and they say to the Benjamin, hey, bring them out. Bring out these ones that did this act. We want to kill them. And what does Benjamin do? The tribe, they said, no, not going to happen. Again, this is what you see is corruption. You see just a foolishness that's taking place. And notice as we go on in verse 11. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. They came together. This one incident, it was stuck in their minds. And we do see this oftentimes, even within this country, people will get behind a certain thing, a certain movement. Sadly, a lot of times this has nothing to do with God and holiness and righteousness. But they'll get behind something. And boy, there'll be this kind of force behind it. And they want to do something right. Or they think they're doing something right. So here are ones, they're all united. They've got their cause. They want vengeance. They want blood. The tribes of Israel sent men all through the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what wickedness is this that is done among you? Now therefore deliver us the men, that we may put them to death, and put away the evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. So what happened? Well, they said, all right, if you're not going to listen, we're going to fight against you. In verse 15, the children of Benjamin were numbered at the time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. These men were ones who were well known to be able to, with a slingshot, to hit somebody, even just a little hair standing on end, to be able to hit that hair. They were very, very well trained, very talented. But again, you're talking about 400,000 against less than 30,000. The odds are against them. You've got a massive group. And this is the thing, is that the people, they were all in one accord, and they believed fully, we're going to win. And it says here in verse 18, and the children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God. Now that's not a bad thing. They go to the house of God, they ask counsel of God. But notice what they say, which of us shall go up first to the battle against the children of Benjamin? Which one? Which one is going to go first, God? And God said to them, Judah will go first. The children of Israel rose. In the morning they encamped against Gibeah, and the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin. The men of Israel put themselves in array to fight against them. Long story short, they were destroyed massively that day. Not Benjamin, but the people that were wanting vengeance. They got crushed. 22,000 men died that day. Think about that. God tells them, put Judah first. So they do. And they get killed. Why? Why did God do that? Then we go to the next, in verse 23, the children of Israel went up, and what do? They wept before the Lord. They've got their rears handed to them. They're wondering why. They're saying, God, what's going on? They asked counsel of God, shall we go up again to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother? The Lord said, go against them. They go again. Guess what? They lose 18,000 men this time. 18,000. God just playing with them. Here's the thing about it. They already had it in their mind, right from the beginning, what they were going to do. They should have, right off the bat, sought counsel to who? God. You have to understand they're leaderless. And for a long time, they have not been seeking God at all. But finally, something happens when they say, we're going to go attack them. We've got 400,000 people. Boy, we're going to smoke them. And they go to God, but they don't say, God. They don't say the first time, should we do this? They say, God, which one of us should go first? You got to understand something. We're oftentimes, when you think about like children, when they're trying to do something themselves, over and over, and it messes up. And you look and you say, I can help you. I can help you. No, I got it. I got it. Just tell me what to do. Listen, I can help you. No, I want to do it myself. God's going to, sometimes you'll sit there and say, okay, do what you want. Now God, He tells them, He says, I already know your heart is fully to go after them. They never sought God before when it came to fighting, when it came to how they should go about this, how they should rectify it. They never sought Him. Finally, they go and they say, maybe we should consult and see who's got to go up first. And God says, put Judah. And maybe it was because the people of the tribe of Judah were so prideful and they were ready and rip-roaring to go. I don't know. But God says, go ahead and put Judah. Did you do that because He just wants them to die? No. But they already are ready to go, and they have all their plans situated. They're not asking God whether or not they should do it. They're just saying, God, how can we do it? How should we do it? And God says, all right, you want to do that, fine. And then they get obliterated. And then the next time, now they're saying, well, wait a minute, God, maybe, God, are we not supposed to do this? Are we not supposed to do it? Now, here's the thing. When we think about it, when you read about Balaam in Numbers 22, Balaam was a prophet of God who one time he asked God, God, do you want me to do this? You want me to go with Balak and the messengers? And God says, no, I don't want you to go with them. I don't want you to speak to them. I don't want that. But then Balaam again asked God, well, God, what about now? What about now? God didn't change his mind. But then the second time God says, go. Is it because God's just playing? No, because we just don't want to listen to God most of the time. We just don't seek. We don't even look. He's not the first option. And so there's sometimes you're going to go through life and you're going to go through struggles and you're going to fall flat on your face and say, God, I asked you what to do. No, you didn't. You really didn't. Well, God, I was praying to you. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. And there's times where God will say, fine, go ahead. If that's the way you're going to learn, because notice here what happens. They finally say, God, we go up against them now? What do we do? God says, go up against them. Their hearts were already set on that. But it says in the second day, they lose 18,000 men. Now notice verse 26. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up, and they came to the house of God, and they wept. And they sat there before the Lord, and they fasted all day until evening. And they burnt offerings to God. They burnt offerings and made peace offerings before God. What do we do? Now they are broken. They are in despair. God, what do we do? God, we're just going to lift our hands up to you. We're just going to focus on you. And God says, that is what you should have done right from the beginning. Notice in verse 27, the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the Ark of the Covenant was there in those days. Now, I don't think it's a mistake why this is put here. The Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of God's presence. But guess what? It doesn't matter whether you have a symbol of God's presence. It's whether His presence really is there in your life. You can have the symbol, you can have the object, but that doesn't do anything. You can have the pews, you can have the pulpit, you can have that, but that's not spiritual life. And notice what it goes on to say. In verse 28, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days. That's not there by mistake either. Phinehas was one who was so angry over the sin and wickedness and corruption that was going on in Israel, he did something about it. And God counted it for righteousness. They had a legacy. They not only had a symbol of God's presence, but they had a legacy. That here, guess what? Phinehas in the past, boy, he stood for the Lord. How many times do we say, oh, we used to do this. We used to do this. Oh, this used to be done. Oh, we used to do this. Oh, that's wonderful. But if you're just living by a legacy in the past, and you do nothing now, and don't seek God's face now, and don't trust Him now, guess what? There's no good in it. Notice as you go on. And the children of Israel, or in verse 28, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet go again out to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? They're in despair. And they say, God, just tell us what to do. We're surrendered. And notice what He says. Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. It took, people say, third time's a charm. But again, twice they were defeated. Finally, they came to the point of brokenness and despair, and they said, we don't know what to do, God. Well, we just give it up to you. And God says, I was waiting for that. And now I'm going to deliver them in your hands. And He does do that. But I want you to turn to me here to Hosea, and we'll be finished. Notice with me in Hosea in chapter 5. Hosea chapter 5. Let's look here. Hosea chapter 5, and we'll notice in verse 14, the latter part. For I will be unto Ephraim as a lion, and as a young lion to the house of Judah. Even I will tear and go away. I will take away, and none shall rescue him. Why does He do that? Why does God say, I'm going to tear and I'm going to run away? I'm going to go away from them. I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction they will seek me early. In their affliction they will seek me early. You can say, well, God, they were trying to do something good. They were trying to do something right. All of them were wicked. They were all corrupt. The problem was they were leaderless, and they had not been seeking God in the past, and all they really were concerned about was vengeance. And they said, God, how do we do this? We're going to clean house. And it didn't happen. And they went through trial, and finally they said, God, we've got to be seeking you fully. What you do, we do. And when they finally put up their hands and surrender to Him, God says, the battle's mine. Mine. Not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. And there's times you're going to go through struggles and you're going to say, why God? Why God? No, it doesn't make any sense. And the problem is you've not been seeking Him. You've not been searching and surrendering your life to Him. Until you come to that point and you finally say, God, I give it all to you. That's what he's waiting for. God says, in the affliction, then you'll seek me early. You'll seek me early. And for those that go through the struggles and trials and they don't seek him, boy, I feel bad for you. So we do see this is a hard passage. But there's a principle there that God was teaching the children of Israel as well. I'm going to give you the battle. I'm going to defeat them for you. But it's because of me and my power, not by you. Not by you. But let's pray this morning.